Okay, this is my brother Titus, and he is going to be my audience member for speech number 2. Okay. Today, my speech topic is going to be about the Supreme Court case Loving versus Virginia. And back when I was a senior in high school, I also had the opportunity to research landmark Supreme Court cases, and I chose Loving versus the state of Virginia. So to jump into my speech, our love story was not always easy, but it was always worth it. These were words said by Richard Loving in 1967 after winning his case against the state of Virginia. So we have all encountered challenges in our lives, and today I want to tell you about the Lovings and their fight for equality. So there are many layers to the Lovings case, but today I want to talk to you about who the Lovings were, the laws Virginia had banning interracial marriage, and the Supreme Court's decision on the case. So to understand the impact of the case, we first need to know the history behind it. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is who the Lovings were. So in a film produced by MacNeil Productions in 2014, they talk about who the Lovings were and the history behind their case. So the Lovings were an interracial couple living in Central Point, Virginia between 1958 and 1975. Richard was a white man, and he was also a construction worker, and Mildred was a part Cherokee, part Black homemaker. So when Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, they had to go to the District of Columbia, also known as Washington, D.C., to get married, as Virginia had laws banning interracial marriage at this time. So they went and they got married, and then they returned back to Virginia. A couple weeks later, they ended up being found out by the local law enforcement and were arrested in their homes in the middle of the night. When they went to see the judge, they were faced with two options. It was either go to jail for 1 year, or they do not return to Virginia for 25 years together. The Lovings did not stay gone for too long, so that is a good point in this to point out. And so even though they were just two people, their love defied state laws. So the next thing I want to tell you about is Virginia's laws against interracial marriage. So in a dissertation wrote by Christy Tatum in 2013, she talks about the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 and how the Loving versus Virginia case helped strike down those laws. So in Virginia in the 1960s, they still followed the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. So what the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 did is it banned interracial marriage between white people and people of color. A lot of this stemmed from the eugenics movement that was happening during the 19th and the 20th century. And so just to tell you about the history about the eugenics movement. So what eugenics is the belief of getting better quality genes out of people by selective breeding. And so what they would do to kind of enforce that is they would do forced sterilizations on people they deemed of bad quality genetics. So people of color, people with physical disabilities, and people with mental disabilities were the main targets of these laws. And they also did ban interracial marriage, and they would also have some immigration control, because a lot of this was also during the 1920s, and there was a lot of hate towards immigrants that were moving in during this time. And then part of that is they would also make sure that the race of any babies born in areas that had these laws had their race put on it. So if you had a family, say 3 generations back, who was half Black, you would also be considered Black, and so that would have to be put on your birth certificate. And a large figure behind the eugenics movement was Dr. William Plecker, and he was also involved in Virginia's legislative branch. And so he provided the scientific backing to help pass the laws that if interracial marriage and people in those marriages had children, it would dilute the bloodline and ruin the white purity in a sense. So when the Lovings were arrested, it sparked a legal battle that would make its way all the way to the Supreme Court. So as I mentioned, the Lovings did not stay out of Virginia for too long. So 5 years after they were forced to leave the state, they did return back, and they started counseling with a lawyer. I can't really remember or recall his name at this time, so I do apologize. But the lawyer realized that they were going to need a lot more help than he could provide. And so he referred them to the ALCU, also known as the American Civil Liberties Union. And so what the ALCU did for them is they helped them petition their they helped them petition to appeal the prior conviction that they had gotten from the judge, and also petition the Supreme Court to hear their case. So their argument for this was that Virginia's laws violated the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment, as well as the Due Process Clause. So what the Equal Protections Clause did is anyone under the law should be treated equally and fairly, not based on their race or gender or any demographic or background of that kind. And the Due Process Clause also says the same thing, but decisions should not be made based on those characteristics, if that goes hand in hand. So they both go, like I said, both go hand in hand with each other. And so they went, and the Supreme Court heard their case, and in a unanimous decision of 9-0, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Lovings. They also agreed that it violated the Equal Protections Clause and the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, as well as these laws had no backing or anything else to do besides uphold white supremacy and maintain racial discrimination. So that was really big, as a lot of laws had miscegenation laws, I apologize if I said that wrong, which also says the same thing as the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. It banned interracial marriage between white people and people of color, mainly focusing on Black people. So that was really big, because racial discrimination was a big thing during that time and years prior. And these effects took a long time to see. So in 1967, only 3% of marriages reported nationally were interracial. And then it was reported again in 2019 that number had rose between 11 to 13%. Now that is only an 8% increase over 52 years, but I do think that is just really awesome to see. So in conclusion, in my speech, I hoped to inform you about who the Lovings were in their fight for marriage, the laws Virginia had against interracial marriage, and the Supreme Court's ruling and the effect it had on the U.S. And as I said before, we all face challenges in our lives, big or small. And I think that we can draw inspiration from these two, that no matter how big the battle, it is still worth fighting for. Richard Loving said that the freedom to marry who you love is a fundamental right, and I could not agree more. The story of these two people shows us that love can conquer all if we try our best. I'm sorry, he was like, oh my God. And then here's my audience member again.